It's very well documented that kind of he lives a life of excess. He doesn't smoke, but he drinks heavily. The British describe one of his drinks as, they call it liquid fire. It has crushed emeralds, pearls and opium in it, and it's said to kind of burn your lips as it touches them. And so this all catches up.
That sounds great and we need to try some, but I don't think I have crushed pearls and emeralds and opium lying around to try that, I'm afraid. Welcome to Echoes of History, Davinder. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
It's a pleasure. I'm very keen to get to know more about the subject of today's episode, Ranjit Singh. So, Assassin's Creed Chronicles India puts players into the heart of the Sikh Empire in the Punjab in the 19th century. Ranjit Singh represents the most successful ruler of the Sikh Empire. He's born in the Punjab in 1780, becomes Maharaja in 1801. I wonder if you could set the scene for us a little bit in terms of what the Punjab was like during Ranjit Singh's early life. What kind of region is he growing up in?
Well, it's an extremely volatile region. The last guru of the Sikhs, Guru Gobind Singh, dies in 1708. And after that, about the next sort of 7 to 8 decades, the Punjab is in chaos, effectively. The Mughal Empire is waning. British are kind of further encroaching from the east, and we see a decline of the Mughal Empire in the north. And at that time, we have this period of where there's these repeated invasions of the Punjab. The Punjab is really crucial to kind of understand that where it is. It's a gateway, the invasion route into India, and that's where Ranjit Singh is. And just before the time of his birth, there's been a series of invasions by the Afghans, the Persians, and he emerges, in his younger years to kind of look at this landscape, which is now almost, there's a vacuum that's been left after these invasions. These invaders come in, they sack the Mughal treasury, and then they leave. They don't stick around. And then that leaves an opportunity for the Sikhs to kind of lay claim to the land. And so when Ranjit Singh is born, there's a number of kind of Sikh clans who, much like the Scottish clans, they rule the land kind of independently. They quarrel and fight with each other repeatedly, yet they weirdly get together when there's a foreign threat. And he's born into one of those. He's born into one of the smaller ones, in fact.
It reminds me, as a medieval historian, of big quotes about the Normans that we get from a chronicler called Audric Vitalis, who talks about how they infight all of the time. They're like a dog biting at their own tail all of the time until someone attacks them from the outside, at which point they all suddenly come together and are willing to fight a common enemy. It's kind of the unifying aspect of an external threat, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have common enemies. And the Sikhs, their warlike kind of nature, has been born through kind of adversity, through the challenges that they faced during the times of the gurus. And so they're ferocious. They take baptism having drunk water from the same bowl that's been stirred by a sword blade, having warrior ballads being sung as they kind of go through this initiation. So they are born with that spirit. And I think many Punjabis and Sikhs, and this doesn't actually just extend to Sikhs, I think it is in the Punjabi nature. It's to do with the terrain, but it's also to do with history and the psychology of where that warrior culture actually came from. So, and they can't seem to just switch that on and off. So it's still there, which is why they go to war with each other. They're forever kind of quarrelling, extending their own boundaries. And Ranjit Singh, emerges as this personality who knows how to manage those more like tricky characters, basically.
Yeah. What is the terrain of the Punjab like? What is the landscape like there?
Yeah, so it's known as the kind of the breadbasket of India. It's a fertile land. It's the Punjab plains. So we're talking about a flat landscape that's surrounded by hills, in the north in particular. So these are largely, landowning, farming communities, the Jats, who are known for, back then and even today, there's many farming communities. They live with their kind of heart on their sleeve, but they're also communities who are very much in tune with nature, who are very much in tune with winning big and losing big, with regards to their harvests and the weather and that kind of thing. They kind of relish life. But yeah, the landscape is largely a flat rural one.
Is there anything about the Punjab that made it a natural kind of contender to be the core of an empire, or is it a bit of a surprise? I mean, it sounds like it's a fertile region that has a lot going for it, but if it's also this gateway to attack India that's constantly under pressure and under threat, it's maybe a bit of a surprise that an empire springs up there.
Yeah, I think that kind of there'd always been kind of empires there. It's the border of India. So that if we're thinking about Mughal India, for example, it's the outer kind of bastion of the empire in the northwest. And I think the reason why the Sikh Empire kind of comes about there is that it was always it goes back, the land, the history of that land goes back to the Greek invasions, Alexander the Great. That's where he stops, in the Punjab. And so I think historically, as in terms of its position, it was always the place that the invaders were coming in and out from. But equally, once it was kind of a bit more stable, it was the place from which the invaders were prevented from coming in, and it was the security kind of stop. So the Sikhs naturally kind of emerge in that area, and it's favourable, for example, for the East India Company to have them there as this buffer zone, which is one of the reasons why it's the last areas for the East India Company to conquer, which then in itself, helps Ranjit Singh in time kind of consolidating that region as his empire.
Yeah. So this is where Ranjit Singh is growing up. Do we have a sense of what kind of impact that region had on his character as he's growing up? What is it about Ranjit that makes him emerge as a ruler from his younger years?
Yeah, so I think, with many leaders or any successful characters, I think, in history, in many ways Ranjit Singh is no different, in that when we delve into their lives and their childhoods, actually we kind of tend to see a lot of adversity and overcoming adversity. So he's born into one of the smaller missals or confederacies. They're not particularly powerful. He is from a very young age learning warfare, going into battle at the age of 10 with his father, alongside his father, who dies around about that age when he's about 10. There's only about 15 years or so that separate one generation from another. So, you read about his father, for example, and and you can imagine someone in their 50s, but actually his father dies in his mid-20s. And Ranjit Singh, by this point, is already very experienced. Later on in his life, Ranjit Singh's supposed to be an excellent shot, for example. And later on in his life, there's an anecdote where someone says to him, well, how did you become so good? And he says, well, when my father died, he said, I was left 10,000 shots. And he said, I shot every one. There's another account that says that, Sikh children are riding horses and practicing archery by the age of 5. So he's born into this. And I think what shapes him early on is that he, at the age of 10, when he becomes a leader of his confederacy, immediately his life is threatened. There are assassination attempts on him. He's considered a possible threat in the future. Other rulers want to kind of consolidate his dad's kingdom. And he, through a marriage of alliance, has a mother-in-law who is extremely experienced. And she, when in his younger days, is his guiding force. So he's, it's the right place, the right time. We mustn't forget also, he's not well read, he's illiterate. But that means that his other skills become kind of enhanced. So he's then said to possess a really fantastic memory. He's supposed to be very good at maths. He picks up things very, quickly. He's also, from a very young age, blinded in one eye through a bout of smallpox. And, ordinarily you could think of that as being this disability, and it actually makes him a better warrior. He has to physically move about in a way that other warriors don't move about because of his restricted field of view. And he's overcoming that challenge. He's getting used to overcoming big challenges very young. And I think his survival of that kind of paves the way for his later success.
Wow, it sounds like he's being very much crafted by all of these hard experiences in his younger years. And I think it's really interesting what you say about there's a danger sometimes, isn't there, with conflating the idea of being illiterate with being stupid, because he's illiterate, but he's clearly not a stupid man. He's got this great memory. He's good at maths and things like that. So we need to be very careful about how we think about, particularly around people around this time,
I think this,
illiteracy.
Sorry, you just reminded me of a couple of other little small anecdotes. I mean, he modelled himself from the great Emperor Akbar. And Akbar, the first of the great Mughals, was also illiterate, yet had a huge library, yet is being read to. And there's another anecdote where Ranjit Singh's forces are besieging this fort, and according to these stories, Ranjit Singh says to the artillery guys, direct your cannon away from the library. You must preserve the library in that fort. This is coming from an illiterate man, but who is clearly cultured and still educated in some way. So he's, I find that quite an ironic kind of juxtaposition, really, thinking about this illiterate man who's actually still preserving libraries.
Yeah, no, it's a really fascinating blend as a part of his character. How then does the Sikh Empire come into being, and how does Ranjit position himself at the head of it eventually? Yeah,
so we have these 12 clans, and interestingly, the British, well before Ranjit Singh coming to power, almost kind of make a prediction. They're observing that land. It's crucial for them. The stability of the Punjab is crucial for the British Empire to their survival, because it's a time of the great game, and there's a constant threat that the French and the Russians are going to come in through the northwest and invade. And they kind of predict, and they say that these guys are so unruly, and there's so much infighting that there has to be one of them that comes through. They say the only way what's going to happen is that one guy is going to come through who's going to overpower the others. And that's who he is. And it's through kind of guile and strategy that Ranjit Singh, it's often written that he unifies the Punjab, or he unifies these leaders. He doesn't necessarily unify them. He actually overpowers them one by one and just brings them kind of under his fold. And he has a huge appetite. He's extremely driven when he's very, very young, and proves himself at the age of 16 as being this very capable leader. And they all, one after the other, just eventually have to submit. They either go to war with him or they ally with him, and that's just how it is. Yeah, he's extremely captivating, and he's extremely hungry.
Do we get a sense of, alongside that military capability, do we get a sense of his character? Do people kind of like him? Are they willing to undertake diplomacy with him as well? Or is this really just a case of being beaten down into submission by him?
I think they like him too. He's extremely charismatic. He is, many of his contemporaries describe him as being this genius, this man who has a sixth sense of things, never revealing what he's necessarily thinking until the very last moment. But also, I think what's really crucial actually to understanding his success is actually he's written about as being extremely generous, extremely kind. It's recorded that there wasn't a death penalty under him. People obviously died during that period, but there was strictly no death penalty under Ranjit Singh. And I think much of his character is down to the fact that the Sikhs only make up about 10% of the population of the Punjab. So the Punjab is largely Muslim. It's about 70% Muslim, about 20% Hindu. And Ranjit Singh recognises the challenges of how to kind of manage such an empire. And that is reflected, in his government. You rise through merit. It's a secular state. He doesn't favour any one particular faith, and I think that goes a long way. And so he certainly has a lot of respect. But I think his generosity and his kind nature beneath that tough exterior are really kind of crucial in understanding why he's so successful.
It's interesting that such a minority group are ruling kind of the majority population of other faiths. Does Ranjit have to take any steps to kind of reconcile his Sikh faith with a more secular government, or does that fit naturally with what he's trying to achieve?
It doesn't fit completely naturally. He's a man of vision. He's not a guru. He's not a religious person in the sense that he's not viewed as being a religious leader. He may consider himself religious and devout, but he is a king. And so he does come into conflict, let's say, with the more kind of orthodox Sikhs or the traditional Sikh warriors who may not have that kind of vision that he has, which is as inclusive as his vision might be. So it's not an easy task for him. He has enemies at home, he has enemies within his ranks. There's a group of Sikh warriors called the Agali Nihangs. They have kind of conical blue turbans with razor-sharp quoits and things like that in them. And, outside looking in, you may just think, okay, Sikhs, they must all be on the same side. But actually also, they were making attempts on Ranjit Singh's lives. They thought that he was far too liberal. They thought that he was far too kind of cordial with the British. They were worried about the threat of British invasion. Yet Ranjit Singh is having to play a very different game. So he's fighting on all fronts, really.
When does the Sikh Empire kind of come into being? Is there a beginning date of that empire?
I think the actual date that we can kind of proclaim as the beginning of it is probably 1801, when Ranjit Singh's 21, when he finally takes Amritsar, the kind of the holiest of holy cities of the Sikhs. And it's at that moment that he is anointed and proclaimed Maharaja, great king, by a descendant of the very first guru of the Sikhs. So a very highly revered and highly regarded holy man, a warrior holy man, says to the rest of the Sikhs, this is your guy, this is the Maharaja. It's not to say that Ranjit Singh doesn't have power before then. He's repelling the Afghans from Amritsar when he's 16 years old, 1796. In 1799 he takes Lahore, but I don't think, and not until he takes Amritsar, that empire kind of begins. It's worth also noting actually that he's not the only Sikh king, even then, because there's the land of Punjab is the land of 5 rivers, Punjab, 5 rivers, and one of those rivers in the east separates a group of other Sikh kings who are actually under British protection from Ranjit Singh. They have a choice in either kind of being assimilated and taken in by his empire, his ever-expanding empire, which is what he's obviously keen to do, or do they side with the British and then help kind of define this boundary? And that's what they choose to do. So there will certainly be another group of Sikhs that actually claim that actually they also had their own kings, which they did. But his empire is by far the most kind of noted and largest.
And Ranjit's reign is kind of remembered for significant reforms in terms of infrastructure and government and things like that. And particularly, I guess, maybe not unsurprisingly, given how he's arrived at power, reforms to the military. What did he do to change the army, and maybe what were some of his other significant reforms as king?
He's remembered as a huge patron of the arts. He gave patronage to the artists who he inherited as he was expanding his kingdom. Many of these artists had previously fled kind of Mughal courts and then set up shop in the hills, in the Punjab hills. And that extends to kind of literature and architecture and painting and naturally arms and armour. So all of that is certainly one of his legacies. But as you say, I think his kind of visionary nature, particularly with regards to the success of his military, is much of that is actually is because of the fact that he has to have this diplomatic, cordial relationship with the British, because he is the buffer, protecting the rest of India, British India, from invasion. And during that time, the wily Ranjit Singh, he's accepting diplomatic gifts, but at the same time, he's measuring up the British. They're measuring him up and he's measuring them up. Neither of them really want to go to war with each other, but he uses those effectively, about sort of almost 40 years to improve, to learn, to modernize, to enhance his army. And much of that is down to the fact that he employs ex-Napoleonic officers who, after Napoleon is defeated, many of these European generals and officers venture east to seek their fortune, and he takes them in. He's suspicious of them at first, thinks that many of them are spies, but then they went over his kind of confidence, and he takes them in, and he uses, there's up to 100 foreign officers at his court, Americans, Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, French, English. He's got Englishmen in his army, training his troops. It's an extremely complicated time. It's not just English on one side and Sikhs on the other side. It's very, very mixed. And those French officers, in particular, a man called Jean-Francois Allard, helped to modernize his army, particularly the kind of the infantry and the cavalry. He's an American man, Colonel Alexander Gardner, who becomes colonel of the artillery. So that really was hugely important, and I think much similar to kind of what we see today, with modern armies in countries kind of arming one another when they're friends and suddenly finding themselves to be enemies and then facing their own weapons. That's what we see here as well, because once Ranjit Singh passes away, and the Sikhs go to war with the British, all of that learning and all of that kind of modernizing is now to the detriment of the British, because now they're facing these modernised troops.
It sounds like some of the liberal nature of his government that he's criticised for is actually a bonus in terms of the openness. He's willing to bring in all of these different ideas and notions that can really help him build something that is a force to be reckoned with. As you say, he's sitting there as a buffer. I mean, during his lifetime, his relationship with the British, is that mostly about kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or is there something a bit more complex going on there? Are they just balancing, waiting for one of them to snap kind of thing?
They are. I mentioned this river, which is this border between Ranjit Singh's kingdom and the protected Sikh states that now defines the East India Company area. The British permanently have 39,000 troops stationed there, ready to go into Punjab if Ranjit Singh steps over. He wants to expand eastwards. He, takes it up to his absolute limit. So he, in his early years, is very much trying to get into all four directions, and then he's kind of limited by the British in the east. And I think both of them realizes that he will go to war if he has to. He kind of almost wants to, but equally he understands that he's outgunned. A large portion of the British forces are, mercenary native troops, and the British are paying their officers better than Ranjit Singh's paying his officers. And so he understands his challenges, and the British equally also are fighting wars on different fronts. It's not the right time for them to be going to war with Ranjit Singh. So it's and then they are forever suspicious of each other, forever have spies in each other's courts, every now and then coming together to restore someone to the throne or to kind of quell some sort of rebellion. But at the same time, I think they all kind of know what's on the cards. The British also appreciate how great a leader Ranjit Singh is and how much respect he has, and I think in many ways they're just biding their time. They know that the moment he and this is written about, the moment that he dies, the Punjab is going to be kind of swept into chaos. And that might be a better moment for them to kind of make their move.
Yeah, fascinating. It sounds like a really kind of fraught, tense game of brinkmanship where they sort of need each other, but they would almost like an excuse to fight each other, but neither would be really sure who would actually win that fight. Ranjit might be outgunned, but you never know what's going to happen when you end up going to war. So you get this really tense, almost stalemate in the Punjab region that must have made it a difficult place to be during that period.
To some degree, because it's always kind of almost simmering under the surface. But most of his life, I actually think that is probably viewed as one of the most peaceful and quiet times in the Punjab. And actually, I think that's the reason why he is so highly regarded, not just amongst Sikhs, but by wider Punjabis east and west of the border. In modern day Pakistan, about I think about 80% of his kingdom is actually now in modern day Pakistan. And so that really actually probably his kind of biggest kind of legacy is the fact that Ranjit Singh, despite what we've just described as this hostile relationship with the British, actually he brings a peace to that region that it hasn't seen for an awfully long time, and that I think is measured by us today when we look at the arts that flourished at that time. It's the arts and the kind of material and cultural heritage that survives that helps us to understand that could only have been flourishing at a time of peace. So I think, it's a strange one. It was volatile, yet actually, relatively, it was the most peaceful time the Punjab had ever seen.
Yeah, and talking about material culture for a moment, the Koh-i-Noor diamond is something that people might be familiar with in recent times because it was at the centre of a bit of discussion and controversy around the coronation of King Charles III recently. But that becomes a kind of central symbol in Ranjit's empire too. How does the Koh-i-Noor come to be associated with Ranjit Singh?
So I think with regards, the Koh-i-Noor diamond, hugely contested, historic diamond. It effectively, as we follow that diamond, we can see where the power sits. For those that want for nothing, the people who are in possession of that diamond are effectively the greatest rulers on the planet. That's kind of how it was. And so, tracing its origins back, it's naturally this covetous gem that everybody wants to get their hands on. And so it was at one point it was, in the Peacock Throne. Nadir Shah's invasion in the 1730s means that he sacks the Mughal treasury, taking back 6,000 wagons of treasure to Persia, taking back the diamond with him. And then it makes its way to the Afghan rulers, and then it makes its way to Ranjit Singh when he comes into conflict with them. So that's how he comes about kind of possessing it. The power is just naturally shifting, and as that power shifts, people, obviously naturally take the opportunity to seize the diamond amongst all the other prize jewels, many of which are now in the royal collection, given the annexation of Punjab in the late 1840s. So it's a real symbol of kind of who's in charge. Ranjit Singh, it's said, on his deathbed, was gifting it to a Hindu temple, which never obviously happened. But it's interesting to think about how he kind of viewed it and saw it. But he clearly desperately wanted it.
Yeah, it's interesting how a thing like that can become, as you said, a symbol of power and authority, and it moves where the power moves. So for Ranjit, having that is a real outward marker of the fact that he is now the centre of power in the region because he holds, amongst other things, the Koh-i-Noor diamond.
Absolutely. He wore it in an interesting way as well. So, when you think about the word Maharaja, typically you kind of imagine someone kind of bedecked in jewels head to toe. But Ranjit Singh wasn't really like that. It speaks to his humble warrior origins, relatively humble. But they say that, Ranjit Singh would often enter court with a string of pearls around his waist and the Koh-i-Noor diamond on his bicep. So that's how he would often wear it with not much else in terms of adornment. So, yeah, he wears it with a kind of he wears it with class, I think.
And you mentioned as well that the kind of the culture that flourishes during Ranjit's time in charge, I guess encouraged by this period of peace in the region. What are the most kind of notable results of his support for the arts, and do we see a legacy of that kind of renaissance in the identity of the people of the Punjab?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult now because I think, honestly, kind of speaking, the state of kind of material artistic heritage in the Punjab, both east and west of the border, is in dire straits, really, and to some degree that's unsurprising. Much of what we have as a legacy of his artistic traditions, ironically, we have because it left post-annexation of Punjab, and much of that is actually in England. Many of the collections here, whether it be the Royal Collection of the V&A or the British Museum, So actually, weirdly, much of what survives because it did leave. Having said that, there are now, I think, we find ourselves in this period of a little bit of a kind of renaissance in terms of Sikh, Punjabi artistic interest in artistic kind of heritage. So we have some conservation projects happening in the Punjab, both in Pakistan and in India. So there's an increased interest. The greatest kind of legacy of his artistic patronage is obviously the Golden Temple in Amritsar, which he had gilded. So that naturally survives. But even then, the actual, whether or not the surrounding areas, surrounding buildings, many of them which would have been covered in frescoes, they're not in the best of shape at the moment, and I think are still far from kind of being valued and therefore preserved.
Yeah, well, hopefully they'll get some attention and get some of the preservation that they deserve as hugely significant representations of the cultural heritage of that region, I guess. Someone else that I wanted to bring into this discussion is Ranjit Singh's mother, Raj Kaur. So she plays kind of a pivotal role in his early life, and we know that he will go on to have, I think, something like 20 wives during his lifetime too. Can you tell us about the role of his mother and perhaps the other women in his life and how they were perceived in his empire?
So initially, his relationship with his mother is a difficult one. He is, I mentioned that his father dies when he's quite young, and quite early on, Ranjit Singh kind of falls out with his mother. He thinks that she may be being influenced by someone else who's become a close companion of hers, and he actually comes into direct conflict with his mother. And, it's at that time that he, in this early kind of moment in his life, there's a marriage of alliance which takes place, where Ranjit Singh is betrothed at a very young age. I think he's about 5 years old. And he doesn't get married until he's in his teens, but he's betrothed to a family who is far more powerful, whose female leader is far more experienced. And so, in fact, it's actually his mother-in-law, Sada Kaur, her name was, who is the real kind of main kind of influence and guiding force for Ranjit Singh. He learns an awful lot from her. She's extremely experienced. But later on, he also falls out with her. Everybody's got their kind of sights on leadership. And I think also, we mustn't forget that this is very much a patriarchal society. And once these kind of warrior leader kings die, there is females, and naturally kind of they are threatened. They are preserving, they're wanting to have an heir to the throne, and they are seeking alliances because, this land is kind of fraught with assassinations, all the time. His marriages, which are quite well documented, he has 20 official wives. And, when we look at them, we naturally start to see a bit of a pattern where predominantly they're alliances, they're marriages of alliance into other families for that purpose. And there are some wives that he gets on with, some wives that he doesn't. He has legitimate children with some of his wives. He has a number of adopted children. He has a number of children who are often kind of just presented to him after he's returned from a campaign. They've clearly were not his children, but he brings them up as his children. So it's extremely kind of complicated. And when we delve into that, we understand that, people are fighting for position. People are, trying to secure themselves. And I'm mainly trying to secure an heir and someone in the right place kind of after the death of Ranjit Singh. One of his most famous wives, if not the most famous, is probably his last and youngest wife, Rani Jindan, who was the mother of Maharaja Dalip Singh. So, we remember Dalip Singh as being this, the first Sikh in this country and almost like an adopted child of Queen Victoria's. He's the young boy who hands over the Koh-i-Noor diamond. It's his mother, the youngest wife of Ranjit Singh, that is there, after Ranjit Singh's death, who comes into conflict with the British and is seen as a thorn in the side of the British.
So when the game opens, when Assassin's Creed Chronicles India opens, Ranjit Singh is actually already dead. He's been gone for a couple of years. Indeed, in the game, he's poisoned by a Templar. What do we know about when and how Ranjit Singh dies, and what's kind of the immediate aftermath of his passing?
So Ranjit Singh dies in 1839 at the age of 59. Prior to that point, for a number of years, he's been increasingly unwell. It's very well documented that kind of he lives a life of excess. He doesn't smoke, but he drinks heavily. The British describe one of his drinks as, they call it liquid fire. You know, it has crushed emeralds, pearls and opium in it, and it's said to kind of burn your lips as it touches them. And so this all catches up with
that sounds great and we need to try some, but I don't think I have crushed pearls and emeralds and opium lying around to try that, I'm afraid.
One day. So it all catches up with him, and he has, despite being, living an active life, he has a couple of huge strokes towards his later years, and then he dies in 1839, and that immediately, interestingly, actually, there's an account that says that when he dies, there's this quiet and stillness across the Punjab. There's a state of shock, but then everybody's kind of worried about this storm that's coming.
Yeah, almost like the region's holding its breath, waiting to see what happens now he's gone. Absolutely
that. And then we enter into this period of complete and utter chaos. Remembering that, Ranjit Singh has ruled for about 40 years. 40 years is an awfully long time to rule the Punjab, peacefully. And now within a decade, the entire kingdom is collapsing because there's no successful kind of heir to kind of take the reins, really.
How much of the blame should Ranjit Singh be given for that? Is this the case that he was such an exceptional person that nobody else was ever going to be able to carry on what he'd achieved? Or did he fail to settle a proper, clear succession plan that would protect his heir and allow the Sikh Empire to continue to flourish?
Well, I think in some ways, my personal view is that I think he's unfairly kind of treated by history as being wholly responsible for the collapse afterwards. We spoke about his early life, and we spoke about very natural things that happened that shaped who he was. How much of his character or his success is through design? I don't think much of it is, really. I think it's just nature kind of, taking its course, and then Ranjit Singh is a product of that. So I don't think he could have designed necessarily or kind of shaped a successor who was going to be as effective and be a force of nature and have the kind of personality that he did. He, even during the course of his life, he's worried about it. He is worried about his first kind of legitimate son and first heir to the throne. He's worried about whether his name is Karak Singh, whether he's going to be able to do the job. It concerns him because clearly Karak Singh doesn't have the nature of his father. He's not smart either. Karak Singh's son, however, Ranjit Singh's grandson, is regarded as being up to the job. But something that happens that Ranjit Singh had no control over is that after Ranjit Singh's death, there are a series of assassinations that take place. And that very young boy, the grandson, he is killed on the day of his father's funeral, of his own father's funeral. So two, strokes in one day, and then the Punjab is in chaos. So, I don't think we can put all of the blame on Ranjit Singh. Also, I think, how much was one man to do? He achieved an awful lot, and then, he's trying to nurture some of the kind of characters and some of his sons through, and it just doesn't quite happen. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I don't think even Ranjit Singh would have predicted the level of kind of calamity and chaos, I think, after his death.
Yeah, and as you sort of alluded to earlier as well, there is also this predator on his borders in the English who are almost waiting for him to be gone because they maybe recognise that he is someone they can't beat, but they're almost waiting for him to be gone, waiting for this chaos to erupt that does happen, which creates a void for them to be able to feed into. So they were almost waiting there, looming over whatever was going to happen when Ranjit Singh was dead.
Yeah, absolutely they were. And they were making their, alliances within his court as well. So, during the anglo-sikh wars in the 1840s, so 5-6 years after his death, the British were, one of the battles, they were on the verge of unconditional surrender. Now, if there's letters going back from the commander-in-chief saying we need to surrender, that means that the British would have been out of India potentially 100 years before they actually left. It would have changed the history of the world. And yet, the Sikhs lose the Anglo-Sikh wars because there's internal treachery. There are generals and chiefs who are sending their own battle plans to the British, who are exchanging their own troops' gunpowder for mustard flour or mustard seed and things like that. So there's an awful lot of internal treachery that's happening because people are, through an act of self-preservation, just thinking about what they can get out of the situation. And that is primarily the reason why the Punjab is lost. It's a combination of all of these factors, the fact that the British have been plotting and working on this moment, but equally there are people within the court who have been scheming and plotting too, and all of that comes together with in resulting in the Punjab being annexed.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and complex story. I feel like we're barely scratching the surface of some of the issues we could talk about here. But before we finish, I just wanted to get on to whether Ranjit Singh has a kind of legacy that endures today. How is he thought about in the Punjab and in India more widely today?
He's considered, I think, one of the greatest rulers. In fact, not just of India, but a BBC poll a number of years ago voted him the greatest ruler of all time, and beating Churchill and Henry VIII, I think. So he's a very, very interesting character. He's extremely highly regarded and is seen as one of the great heroes of Punjab. I think personally one of his greatest legacies is that he isn't just regarded as a great leader by the Sikhs. Punjabis, as I mentioned, Sikhs only made up 10% of the population, but he's a huge hero in Pakistan. Lahore, the capital of his empire, is now in modern-day Pakistan. So I think he leaves a lot for people to kind of emulate. He was remembered as the Sher-e Punjab, the Lion of Punjab, and much like kind of Tipu Sultan of Mysore, one of the great heroes of India who challenged the British. We must remember that Ranjit Singh's kingdom, the Punjab, was one of the last to be conquered by the East India Company, and it wasn't conquered while he was alive. So, and personally, my kind of view of Ranjit Singh, I often, thinking about him as being this huge patron of the arts, I think, because it's through the arts now that we're even able to, delve in and understand what the Punjab was about.
Yeah, wonderful. Before we finish as well, I like to give my guests the opportunity to step into the Assassin's Creed animus and be transported back through time. So is there a particular moment in the life of Ranjit Singh that you would like to be there to witness?
I think probably the moment where he first kind of almost enters the scene but makes his mark. In 1796, there's a force, a 30,000 strong Afghan force that comes to invade Lahore. And Ranjit Singh, many kings and heroes, they kind of flee, they run. Many also kind of make alliances with this invading force. And Ranjit Singh, with one eye, gets together about 5,000 men and pushes those Afghans back. And he's only 16 years old. And I would love to go back in time and meet that Ranjit Singh. He comes back from that a hero. And that's the beginning kind of his journey, has been becoming this Lion of Punjab, this Maharaja of Punjab.
Yeah, I think about what I was doing at 16 and it was nothing like that. I was going to say maybe I'd want to go to one of his drinks parties, but I'm still not sure about trying this concoction of his. But thank you so much for joining us, Davinder. Hopefully the audience has enjoyed getting to know Ranjit Singh a bit better as much as I have. And I think it seems like there's plenty more that we can learn about him. He seems like a fascinating figure who helped define that region in that period and beyond.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for watching Echoes of History. If you've enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the real history behind the Assassin's Creed games, then subscribe for more episodes. You can check out the extended interviews wherever you get your podcasts by clicking on the link in the description. And you should probably also click one of the links that's somewhere on the screen. Wherever they are, do it